Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mystics MMOs. I'm your host, Mystic Raven. All right. So I'm close to finalizing my build for my DK. Actually, I got quite a bit to do, honestly. I still have a lot to do. Picking up passives, for example. I still need my last parts on my dual wield. I still need the rest of my Fighters Guild. That's going to be important because whatever. And I still need to get my weapons transmuted. I mean, not my weapons, my jewelry. Everything else is set up. The biggest thing I wanted to check out, I did this on PTS, but I didn't have my, I mean, I can eyeball it and, calculate it prior. But I'm going with the Maelstrom daggers, the perfect, the Cruel Flurry set. It doesn't need to be perfect if you farm this. Perfect just gives you a little extra weapon damage. But the biggest thing about this was, for me, at the end of the day, was to check the effectiveness in comparison to without it. And I want to share this with you guys. Keep in mind, it's going to scale higher. When I was on PTS, I was getting over 22,000 critical hits on my dot. And I'm going to do one with, I'm going to proc the Briarheart. I'll proc Dom too. Do the Venomous Claw without the Flurry and then with it. And we'll do a comparison. So I want to show you guys the effectiveness of what I'm doing here. And it's pretty good. It's amazing, actually. So let's go ahead. Let's get that food buff back on. I'm going to use this to give me my major brutality. Okay, now I'm just going to go ahead and swipe. I'm not even going to use the flurry ability. We're going to run one full setup rotation. You see the Briarheart's proc, the Dom is proc. We'll let it tick through. Okay, let's toggle the report. My max on my Venomous Claw is 13,000 prior to the flurry application. My crit average was 43%. It's whatever, but the average was 8-1. My max is the most important element there. What my max hit was on my die. That's kind of what I'm eyeballing here. Because why? Because the flurry set is applied to single target dots. Okay. Now, same thing. Okay. Huge difference. Average 11. Max was 18. Prior to 13. That's 5,000 more damage for the tick. My max. Even on the average 8-1. 11.5. That is a massive bump. And we can kind of go across the board with that as well with every single target ability. So let's do the twin slashes. Okay. Max was 6-1. And then 8684. Okay. I wonder if it's just going to do the poison. I should read that again, but should work on both. Okay. 7584. Yep, we get the boost. 6175. Venomous Claw is way more effective with it. Venomous Claw with this setup, just oh my god. I don't know, man. That's some crazy shit. Alright, now I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna lay this and then Poison Injector. Get it before and then we'll get it after. So it's kind of in reverse. Okay. And the average on the Poison Injector is 7.58, max 7.2. Okay. I'm just not going to block the flurry. Okay, 5-4 max with 5-4 average, 100% crit. 5-8 and then 7-2. So we get a much higher max and on the average. That's prior to crit. Our crit, look at our crit difference. 7-2 crit, right? Versus a 5-4. That's almost 2,000 more for the crit. And then, when, like I said, when you take a look at the comparison to the Venomous Claw, it's a no-brainer. 18,000 max to 13,000 max hit. That's 5,000. That last tick hits the highest, 19 on a crit. It's nuts, and they never put this on a DK. They never did it. You know who I'm talking about. I don't want people talking about my builds. It's like, oh man, y'all are crazy. Or like, Mystic don't know what he's... Whatever. I've always known. I just never needed the metrics. I've always done the counting prior. Max 15. Max 19. Oh my flipping God. Seriously. Nothing new. Nothing new here for me. Nothing new. This setup that I'm doing on a DK makes the most sense. That's hitting more. Let me just put this in your head. Go watch any video with, the Maelstrom bow. Any. And look at the max it does on the last tick, right? Versus this max on the last tick. For a DK, this is optimal. For a DK, this is an optimal set. Not saying it's best in slot. Why? Because you can't apply this to every class. Why? Because not every class has dots, single target dots. The DK does. So that's why I never say best in slot. This is just nuts. And they never implemented it. Never. Ever. Proof is in what? The pudding. The reason I'm using the Briarheart is to proc the weapon damage. It's the same setup, the kind of setup that you're typically accustomed to with Burning Spellweave. The only difference of it is when I drop the Briarheart, I'm only going to lose a critical value, which is detrimental why I need the daggers. That dagger is going to make up the value lost. Typically, I wouldn't even drop a critical value. That's like on my Mag DK, there's no weapon that gives me a critical value. So I stay static. Why? Because, to keep the value consistent, right? Those values are very important. Even though they're both precise, I want a heavy end critical modifier. Now keep in mind, I don't even have the next passive. But when I go ahead, my bow does. But when I go in here, I'm almost 68. We're going to drop, I'm at 65% critical rating on the target gummy. I'm already at a 68 critical rating. After the nerf, I'll be at a 65. I'll be able, with this build, to pull over 8k weapon damage. So it's very detrimental for me to make sure, once again, I'm calculating it, I'm putting it to the test, and seeing the results. Now, it's just nice and convenient to say that, okay, I can do a comparison prior to and show people. It's like, on console, I had to show them, I had to always throw up the damage difference. And then PC players like, oh, we have the metrics. It didn't mean shit. The only thing you're able to see is what? How many times you crit versus how many times you didn't. What your max was, you could see it. But you can see the max on eyeballing it. I hate how PC players snub console players. Console players can eyeball it. They don't need... Matter of fact, the more you're accustomed to eyeballing it and getting the count in your head, the better you are at building. You're not dependent on this. Why? Because you make alterations at a faster pace. Right? Because you're not crutching on some metrics to tell you something when you can see it for yourself up front. You make those adjustments, and then when you make those adjustments, you go back to the target dummy and you eyeball it again. Right? You scrutinize everything without a metrics. When you get a metrics, it's just the confirmation of what you saw. That's all it is. It's the confirmation you already you could see. Once you get accustomed to eyeballing it, guess what? You can calculate everything, you know, you can predetermine a lot of your configurations. You can predetermine them once those values, you know, are fundamentally instilled in you. And this to me is more detrimental than relying on a metric, because the metrics won't ever tell me, hey, you know what, instead of using the master bow and, you know, procking in on the dual wield side, maybe you're better off procking in on the bow side and using the daggers for Maelstrom instead on this. Yeah, because the metrics won't tell me that. The metrics won't say, hey man, you're losing damage on a DK because you're trying to do that which you did on another class on this class, and that shit don't work. The metric ain't going to tell you that. You need to figure that one out for yourself. And how do you do that? You go back to the fundamentals. Once again, man, nobody's ever going to rag on my builds. It's just never going to happen. We did it. We came. We saw. We knew. I was like, I'm a Khajiit, man. I'm going to take that bonus. I don't want it to be an orc on a DK. Everybody going to go orc. Everybody going to do this. Everybody going to do that. I'm going to do it different. I'm going to go with the Khajiit. I was a Khajiit DK on the PS too. I want to get that critical value up. I'm not going to extend past 70. I don't. Why? Because all my weapon damage scales off of what? The Briarheart. Yeah, I'm using Levy, but I could run the Berserking Warrior and Levy, and I'm going to lose damage. Why? Because I'm not going to scale weapon damage. I need to scale weapon damage. And Briarheart and Dom's going to do that for me. The two put together scales it significantly. Then add the infused trait. So all of a sudden when I come in, prior to this, I'm already at almost 6. Infuse the weapons, infuse the jewelry, and then put the Bloodthirsty. Now I'm going to be procced over around the 8K. Those make my dots hotter. Significantly hotter. Once I get that passive, it'll be the same value as this. So we'll be at a 68 on both ends. We'll get that 8% passive into the Khajiit skill for what? Our critical 12. We'll get a 12% critical increase. That makes up for the lack of what? Weapon damage. I don't have weapon damage as a Khajiit. So what? I got to do what? Use marginal substitution to make up the difference. And how do we do that? We do that with the Briarheart. Now, had I been an orc, I wouldn't be using Briarheart. I could use a different set like Berserking Warrior and Leviathan on an orc. That's why I said I could still use the Maelstrom Perfected, right? But I would set it up different. I'd have to. Now, as far as the Mundus, I don't have an option on the Mundus. Why? Because of the downtime. Because when the downtime occurs off of the Briarheart, anything under a 6.5, if we don't have a penetrating value or exceeding past the 6.5 consistently, we'll lose DPS. So I'm forced to utilize the Lover Mundus. Right? I'm forced to do that. So give me my 5.6. Now that'll drop 750 points, right? So we'll be at what? At a little under the 5K marker. But that's why we want to stack the weapon damage. We still want to depend on the downtime. But if had penetrating value, I wouldn't need 5,000. I could get away with 3,002 or 3,004 minimal. So that's the most important relevance to all of this, right? It's the most important. I'm always telling you, don't believe me, don't believe them. Test it for yourself. Even if I throw up numbers on a metrics, it don't mean that this is the top configuration based on race and class. Race and class is an adjusted value that needs to be taken in consideration when configuring. And that's what I always go back to. I'm like, would I say that the Khajiit's the best race for the DK? No. I can make up the value on a secondary set. I just have to readjust all these numbers. But as far as the weapons, it was a good call. It's a great call. Whether I use the swords, the maces, depending on race, and secondary set, because those are factored as well. But for the Khajiit, daggers, precise was the way to go. Why? Because I'm going to lose a critical value from the swap off of Briarheart. Right? Once I pick up that passive, I'm going to lose that fourth critical modifier. So to maintain that, I'm going to have to utilize daggers, precise daggers. Once I get that other passive unlocked. That's all. Minimize the the margin difference, or increase it slightly, not tremendously. But yeah, good shit. This is what it's about. This every day. I used to fight for it. Went against the grain more than time and time again. And we got builds coming. Tons and tons of builds coming. And I will never put out something that isn't going to get through the content. It's just never going to flipping happen. I'm not even using a trial set at this point. I don't want a trial set on this build at all. Zero. Why? Because this gives me more optimal results than smacking them in a trial set. That's going to be that's not going to be as effective for this configuration. So there we have it, boys and girls. Said and done. 6-1 once again over a 6-1. We saw, we put it together. There's no such thing as BIS, and if they tell you that shit, tell them to kiss your ass. Once again, I'm Mr. Craven. This is Mystics MMOs. Thank you guys for watching. Have a nice day.